Okay, so now let's talk about how anatomy works in actual practice when you're working from observation, and also how to study anatomy on your own. So I've got a model here. I'm going to focus just on the torso, but I will indicate the head, the rib cage, and the hips. Basically, I start the drawing the same way as I always do. So his head is facing this way, like this. We've got a little bit of rotation off to the side. So the center line is going to run like this. His neck is running this way, and then I'm going to look at the angle of the sternum, which is the clearest indicator of the tilt and rotation of the rib cage. It's doing this, like this way, and it looks like it's facing me more or less directly this way. And then I'm going to divide my rib cage in half this way and indicate the position of my thoracic arch. That's going to help me orient my anatomy on top of this simplified version of a skeleton. Now let's continue. The hips are going to tilt back so that his groin and it looks like his ear are going to be more or less lined up like this. So even at this stage, I'm already using some understanding of anatomy to get my proportions and my placement right. Here's the groin, and we're going to look at the tilt of the hips. They're tilted a little bit this way. Okay, what other indications do I need to make? I'm going to start at the pit of the neck. That's going to be the suprasternal notch. It sits slightly below the top of the rib cage because our first rib tilts downward like this. And then from there, I'm going to look for the angles of the clavicles. So we know that the clavicles attach this way and have this kind of flattened S-curve to them, going like this. And then in this case, his other clavicle is angled back up this way, like this. And then I'm going to hang my grapes for the deltoids. This one's going to face downward like this. And this one is pulled back and is slightly foreshortened, going like that. Then from inside the grape, I'm going to drop my line that represents the upper arm, going this way, and then, okay, we've got some foreshortening here, and some foreshortening here, like this. Okay, I'm going to go through the volumetric construction. Got some cylindrical shapes going this way, like this. And then I know that my iliac crest sits on the upper third of this circle. So I'm going to indicate my iliac crest this way. Again, I'm putting in my anatomical landmarks before I actually put in detail. So I've got my clavicles, the pit of the neck, pit of the stomach, that's going to be suprasternal notch, infrasternal notch, thoracic arch, my iliac crest. I'm putting those things in. They're going to help guide me along. So these are additional elements in my volumetric construction that we really couldn't do before we started discussing anatomy. What other indications? Well, I can also simplify and indicate the position of my pectoralis major. This is a teardrop-shaped muscle that runs all the way along the sternum, the inside half of my clavicle, and then runs to a point in the upper third of the humerus at the same attachment point as the deltoid. So as you can see, we have a muscle that runs like this, running this way. Again, all these things can be indicated in your volumetric, simplified version of a skeleton in your construction phase. This guy is tilting down a little bit, like this. Okay, now I'm going to, as always, I can also indicate the traps, by the way. The trapezius muscle is running this way and this way. Okay, now I'm going to go in and put in my line. So I'm going to speed up this process. You guys know how this works. Okay, now that I've completed my line drawing, I'm going to get my anatomy charts, get out my red chalk, and start overlaying this drawing with my muscles. Before I do, I just want to point out how I use anatomy in getting the lines right. Usually I work from insertion point to insertion point. So when I'm drawing the deltoid, I start off at the acromion, and then I aim my curve towards the insertion point of the deltoid. When I'm drawing the bicep, I'm starting at its origin. We'll talk about the anatomy of the arms later, next week, I believe. I start at the insertion point and move my way down. So I'm actually using my understanding of anatomy to get the lines right. The other thing I'm doing is I'm using my understanding of anatomy to figure out what's sitting in front of what. So the fact that the latissimus dorsi here is moving behind the serratus muscles. What else? Well, here it's obvious, right? This arm is behind the rib cage. But sometimes it isn't. So for instance, we know that the trapezius attaches to the acromion, but the acromion sits in front. So understanding anatomy helps you understand what is in front of what. Additional reason why the study of anatomy is really, really, really important. Now, the next step is to, once again, get out your charts. I've got my charts in front of me here. Here's my chart. Oh, and by the way, just copying charts is also a very good idea. So this is something you guys can do on your own. It's not an assignment, but doing copies of charts is very, very useful. You don't have to copy all of them. So for instance, you don't need to know where the psoas is. That's kind of a deep muscle. But this is something that I'm constantly doing even up until fairly recently. This is a drawing from a couple of years ago. So here I'm studying the different rotations of the arm. This is something that I am constantly doing to reinforce my understanding of anatomy, to help me draw the figure better. From observation, and also, most importantly, from imagination, because I do a lot of drawing from my head as well. Okay, so I've got my chart in front of me. I'm going to get out my red chalk. Where's my red chalk? It's here. And then I'm going to start doing a little bit of detective work. I'm going to try to figure out where I can see my muscles. So have your photograph in front of you. I can see it here. Let's start off with the big stuff. Well, I can definitely see the sternocleidomastoid. I haven't really drawn his ears. They're partially obscured by his hair. They're going to start here, and here's one sternocleidomastoid. We know that it has two attachment points. One attaches to the suprasternal notch, the other one attaches partially to the clavicle, and then there's a little triangle in between. So here's your sternocleidomastoid. I can see the other one. It's forming a little V shape in between the two. So we've got our sternocleidomastoid. Then we have the two shapes of the thyroid cartilage and the thyroid gland. That's right about here, like this. I can see the trapezius, which originate in the back of the head and attach to the acromion process. Here's my trapezius muscle, here. It also attaches to the clavicle, trapezius. We've got the clavicles themselves, going this way. And then we have the three parts of the pectoralis major. So we've got the first portion here, which inserts in the upper third of the humerus. And you can see the insertion point. By the way, choose a photo of a model that's fairly lean, muscular. It doesn't matter if it's male or female. The anatomy is going to be the same with slight morphological differences. So here is the sternal portion of the pectoralis major. We can also see the clavicular portion, which runs on the inside half of the clavicle and inserts at about the same spot. Then we have the deltoid. Here's the deltoid over here, and where does it insert? It inserts at the same spot as your pectoralis muscle at the humerus, going this way. And then here in between we have, well, you guys can see it. It's the infraclavicular fossa, the separation between those two muscle groups. What else do we have? Well, we've got our serratus muscles. Look for them, they're there. This model is fairly lean, but we have the four digitations of the serratus muscle. They're being compressed here. They're being squished because the body is kind of folding towards this side here. And then intertwined between our four digitations of our serratus muscle, we've got our external oblique, which runs along the side. and attaches to the iliac crest, like this. And the same thing's going on the other side, so we've got our 4 digitations here. Look, these muscles sit along the ribs, so sometimes you can see ribs, sometimes you can see the serratus muscle. Either way, you're going to see these kinds of shapes. And then here, our external oblique is very, very stretched out. These are often called accordion muscles. These are muscles that stretch and compress. Okay, by the way, you can put in these kind of muscle fiber striations. That's more, I would say, decorative, if anything. Just make sure that these things are clear. You can draw the direction of the muscles. Basically, you can copy the chart if you want, though it's not necessary, because really what you're looking for is the shape of the muscle, its origin point, and its insertion point. Okay, in the pec, we missed a little muscle. There is the abdominal portion running here, like this. On him, you can actually see it. This little line is often confused with the serratus muscles. It's a separate thing. It belongs to the pec, not the serratus muscles. So here we see it again. We see the 3 parts of the pectoralis major muscle. Again, look for the arm, think about where the upper third is, and then aim your lines in that direction. That's going to help you organize your anatomy. Guys, this study takes a very, very long time. It takes a lot of practice. But beyond all the basic stuff that I showed you, the study of anatomy is going to improve your drawing most. Because, as I often repeat, you have to understand what you're drawing in order to draw it correctly. And if you don't understand anatomy, everything's just a bunch of random bumps, you're going to get lost. So by organizing your anatomy with simple indications of landmarks at the beginning, right, and then putting in really simple shapes, thinking about insertion points, and kind of being systematic about the way you draw, you're going to be able to draw something that's much more accurate. Okay, so we've got our external obliques here. They run along the iliac crest. Now we're going to start working towards the center. So we've got our thoracic arch here, by the way, which isn't straight. So you've got 2 small curves and then 1 large curve going out this way. But you can simplify it. We have our rectus abdominis muscles, which start at the 5th rib. So the 5th rib is right about here, and then end at the pubic bone. The separation between the bundles is called the median line, sometimes called the linea alba, because on some people it has actually like a white tint to it. You can see that in this case, because his body's twisted, that linea alba line runs like this, right, has a curvature to it. And then we can indicate where the belly button is, which is going to be between the shapes of the hips and the rib cage, right about here. And we know that our first bundle sits slightly above the belly button and then runs to the pubic arch, running this way. And then we've got 3 more bundles. 1 bundle overlapping the thoracic arch, the second bundle in between, and then our 3rd bundle. By the way, in reality, the bundles of the abdominal muscles are very rarely symmetrical. Right? Quite often you'll see models where the bundles are slightly offset. I can't really see his 6-pack all that much, so it's not quite evident in this model. But if there are other models that are a little more muscular, take a look. You'll find the abdominal muscles do not line up quite often. All right, let's see. I forgot to indicate the deltoid here. Here's my deltoid. Going this way, going that way. Okay, so here is the next step. Look, we can see a little bit of the latissimus dorsi here coming out, going this way. Next step is to go back to your landmark and anatomy chart and start your labeling. So we're going to start with our sternocleidomastoideus. Let's go back to black. Maybe it'll be easier to see. Sternocleidomastoideus, our trapezius, our deltoideus, or deltoid. Right, we've got our pectoralis major, the 3 portions of the pec major. our clavicular, our sternal, and lastly our abdominal. Don't forget about the abdominal portion. Okay, working our way down, we've got our serratus anterior, serratus ant, then we've got our external obliques, or obliquus externus in Latin. Obliquus externus. So these are the muscles. You also want to label your anatomical landmarks. This is where medical anatomy differs from artistic anatomy. Artistic anatomy includes all these kind of landmarks that, I don't know, maybe they have some kind of medical significance, and maybe they're, I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but they are very, very important in artistic anatomy. So on this side, start labeling your landmarks. This is the suprasternal notch. This is the sternum. We have the infrasternal notch, or the pit of the stomach. By the way, these landmarks are often labeled differently. They have different nicknames depending on what anatomy book you look at. The sternum, the infrasternal notch. What else? The iliac crest. And I forgot one, the thoracic arch. Okay, so this is how you practice your anatomy from observation. You do a drawing, take it through the process of building your armature, your volumetric constructions. Once you put in lines, stop, get out your charts, get out your red chalk, draw in your muscles, and then label both the muscles and your anatomical landmarks. Okay, now we're going to do exactly the same thing, but from the back. So I've got my pose ready, and now I'm going to break it down using my armature, my simple volumes, and then with the help of anatomy, help organize what's actually going on. Alright, so we have a head that's going back this way. Based on the angle of the spine, we have a rib cage that is going this way. So the median furrow, the landmark that runs through the middle of the rib cage, is a great indicator of both rotation and angle of the rib cage. And then I'm going to work my way down. I notice that the hips are coming out this way. The sacrum is also going to help me with my angle and rotation, because the sacrum is almost like this little arrow shape going this way. Right? So whatever the arrow is doing, we know that our iliac crest is perpendicular to it. So we're going to find the middle point. We've got a little bit of rotation going this way, like this. Then we find the halfway point going this way. That's going to give us the origin of the legs, the femur, the great trochanter. One leg is going this way and this way. All right, so let's get the medium furrow. It goes like this, like that. Okay, now let's deal with the shoulders. So from the front, the first thing I did was start with the pit of the neck, and then I worked my way out towards the clavicle and then hung my grapes from the clavicle, my deltoids, right? In this case, I'm going to indicate really lightly, really simply, the position and shape of my scapula. So one scapula, in this case, is pulled inward a little bit like this. We know that it starts slightly below the 7th cervical, which is here. And then, in this case, his shoulder's pulled back a little bit. It's facing down, the arm is facing down, so our scapula is going to be facing down as well. And we know that the bottom of the scapula, base of the scapula, runs ever so slightly past the halfway point. So we're going to draw a little triangle like this. We're going to indicate the position of the scapular spine, like this. And then we're going to hang our grape, our deltoid, from the end. So we're drawing a little triangle, and then we're attaching a egg to it. Triangle egg system. Okay, we're going to do the same thing here. So in this case, we have a little bit of, kind of the arm is kind of being pulled back a little tiny bit, but the scapula sort of more or less remains in place. And by the way, you can see it. You can see the shadow of the scapula right? All that's really easily visible, even on somebody that has lots of mass. Okay, now I'm going to draw the scapula going this way, like this. Here's the scapular spine, and then we have a deltoid running this way. Okay, and then from inside the egg shape, I'm going to start drawing my humerus bone. Right, so it's going this way, here's the elbow, and then the arm runs across like this. And then in this case, his arms are crossed in the back like this. Okay, now let's start breaking the figure down into our simple volumes. We've got a volume here. I use simple angles to indicate the position of the trapezius muscles. This arm is going side to side, this way. The torso is partially obscured here, like this. However, I'm always thinking in volumes, always. Okay, and then I'm going to indicate the cone shape of the upper legs. This more going this way. Okay, now that I've got my construction, now I'm going to go in with my lines. So I'm going to speed this up a little bit. You guys know how this works. The shoulder needs to be a little bit higher. Again, this process allows me to correct early. It's the main benefit of it. This goes down a little more. Okay. Okay, now that I've got some of the lines drawn in, I'm going to switch to my red pencil, get out my anatomy charts. It's going to be this one right here, and see if I can overlay my drawing with the muscles. Now it's going to be tricky. There's going to be a number of different muscles that are visible, some more visible than others. If you guys have this book, I couldn't give you all the plates here, but let me take a quick look here. The entire book has layers of muscles. So here's the rhomboideus, and then here is the overlap between the latissimus dorsi and the rhomboideus. You can see that we're seeing layers upon layers of different muscles. See if you can get all of them. I showed you the order in which they're seated, so you should be able to do that. Let's start with the deep muscles first. So first of all, also indicate your landmarks. So we have our scapula. That's definitely an important landmark. We have the scapular spine. And you can see the scapular spine on him. There's a groove there running this way. this part where the humerus sits in the socket, that's called the glenoid process. That's something we're going to cover when we talk about the arm. Let's get the other scapula. So this one's pulled in a little bit, running this way, like this, and then here is your scapular spine. There's a depression between, like a little hole between the supraspinatus and the infraspinatus, where there's really nothing but bone. So you should be able to see the scapular spine, and it's going to aim towards your acromion process. So you actually start with the acromion and then work your way down an angle to determine the exact placement of the scapula. We've got our median furrow, definitely. Okay, now that we've got the scapula, let's figure out where the 7th cervical is. It's usually a bump here, and then we've got our rhomboideus running from the bump to the middle distance between the scapula. So from here, find the middle. That's going to be about the 5th costal vertebrae, and our rhomboid runs all the way here and runs here. Now, because the rhomboid is responsible for pulling the shoulders in, here we have tension. Right? The rhomboid here is under tension. Here it's being extended, stretched out. It's not quite as strongly visible. Okay, so we've got our rhomboideus muscles. On the outside, we have our serratus anterior. So we have muscles that are running this way, like this. Our serratus muscles, that's going to be here and here. And actually, you can see a fold between latissimus dorsi here, which is bulging, and the serratus muscles. What else? Okay, so then we have our 4 muscles that sit on the scapula. We have our supraspinatus, we have our infraspinatus, we have our teres minor, and in the lower half of the scapula, our teres major. Running this way. Okay, so we've got the deeper muscles. Now we can start putting muscles on top of those. Running along the scapular spine, we have the deltoid. That's running this way, like this. Deltoid runs all the way along the scapular spine. And where's the insert? Here's the arm in the upper third, right about here. So we've got our deltoid. Then we're going to start dealing with our latissimus dorsi, which is going to run 1 notch down, 1 vertebrae down from the end of the rhomboideus. It's going to attach at the same spot as the teres major, so running towards the front of the humerus, running this way, overlapping the entire length of the rib cage on the bottom, and then attaching itself to the sacrum right here, like this. Ah, we forgot about the erector spinae muscles. Okay, so we'll put them in. Yeah, I never said I had to be in order. Okay, so we've got our erector spinae muscles, which originate at the occipital and then bundle all the way down this way and this way. Our erector spinae muscles. Again, you can look at your chart and indicate the direction of the muscle groups the muscles are going with some hatching, so you can kind of copy the chart a little bit. Look, maybe it's going to make things a little bit clearer, maybe not. Maybe it just increases the confusion. Okay, what are we missing? Okay, so we've got our erector spinae. Now let's deal with the very last, largest, most superficial muscle, the trapezius, which originates at the occipital and then works its way to the acromion on both sides, and then runs down, 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 down to the 10th vertebrae, which is basically the base of the rib cage, the bottom of the rib cage. We've got 2 additional ribs on the bottom. They're floating ribs, so more or less covers the rib cage. All right, here is my muscle chart. Now let's start. We forgot about the external obliques. External obliques start in the lower half of the rib cage, the lower 8 anyway, and run this way. And then, okay, this one's more or less obscured. Here's the posterior iliac crest. We've got our sacrum here. Okay, so you can see from the front, a lot easier, a bunch of superficial muscles. From the back, lots of stuff happening in terms of overlap. But watch the tutorial, you'll see how I'm layering one muscle on top of another, and then I think it becomes easier. Okay, so now let's label the muscles, And let's label our anatomical landmarks. Actually, you should probably do the anatomical landmarks first. So let's start off with the mastoid process. The sternocleidomastoideus, right? We forgot about them. Though this guy's hair is completely obscuring it. That's why I didn't draw it. Mastoid process, sternocleidomastoideus. Let me sharpen my pencil very quickly. By the way, this is my studio file. This is what I use to sharpen my pencils at home. Okay, sternocleidomastoideus. We've got our vertebrae prominens. We have our acromion process. We have our scapula. Here and here. Then we have our deep muscles, our rhomboideus. On the outside we have our serratus muscles, serratus anterior. And then we have the muscles that are sitting on the scapula itself. This is going to get confusing here. How should I do this? Okay, we'll do it this way. Here. Okay, above the spine, the scapular spine, we have the supra. Spinatus. The infra. Spinatus. We have below it the teres minor. And the teres major. What else? Then we have two large superficial muscles that sit on top. Actually, three. We've got the deltoid, which sits all the way along the scapular spine. Here, that's the deltoid. We have latissimus dorsi. That's this muscle right here. Latissimus dorsi. Then we have the external obliques, or the obliquus externus. Here they are. It's these muscles right here. Obliquus externus. And then the trapezius muscle. Trapezius. Where should we put it? Okay, we'll just put it here. Trapezius. Lastly, the posterior iliac crest. Crest. And the sacrum. Don't forget the sacrum. Okay, so this is how the study of anatomy works. From now on, have your anatomy charts next to you. Do the drawing as you normally would. Repeat the process. Now that you're a little bit more informed with anatomy, you can use anatomy, simplified versions of anatomy, to do your construction. Put in your lines, then practice your anatomy charts. Get out your red chalk and layer your drawing with a layer of anatomical knowledge. This is not something that you guys are going to get right away. This takes a lot of practice, but this is something that I do to study on my own. So this is actually a really important tool to take home with you, so that when you guys ultimately are out of school and you want to improve in your figure drawing, these are the type of exercises you need to do, constantly reinforcing your knowledge, so that you're little by little able to draw these things better and better.